Okay, go ahead and get
Am I
started.
to be looking at you or at the camera or what?
Go ahead and look at me.
All right,
Yep.
good. That'll be easy to do.
Thanks. All right. Well, first, can you just give us your full name and where you were born?
Okay. I'm Leonard Bathurst. I was born in Altoona, Pennsylvania in 1924, May 4th, 1924. I went through the schools in the Altoona area high school district and took a vocational course in sheet metal aircraft, sheet metal work. Following high school, I went to work for the government at Olmsted Field in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, or Middletown, Pennsylvania. Attended the government's Pennsylvania State School of Aeronautics, where we learned a little more about sheet metal work and blueprint work and things of that sort. I worked at Middletown for several months, and then I was asked to go to Byrd Air Force Base in Richmond, Virginia. When I was down there, I was 18 years old, and since there were no other young people around, I felt that, and the war was on, World War II was underway, I felt that it was necessary for me to get into the service.
Wow. What year was this?
So I enlisted in the Army, and I thought I'd be a paratrooper, but the government thought otherwise, and they put me in the Air Corps. After completing basic training in Miami Beach, Florida, I was assigned to an ordnance school in Santa Anita, California.
Now, what year was this?
This was in March of 1943 that I went into the service.
Okay. So Pearl Harbor had already happened.
Beg pardon?
Pearl Harbor had already happened.
I was a senior in high school when Pearl Harbor event took place, and we finished our schooling. We graduated in June of '42, and it was after June that I went to work for the government at Middletown, Pennsylvania. So in March of '43, I enlisted in the Army and was assigned to Miami Beach, Florida. Okay. After basic training, I went to Arcadia, California. The government had converted the racetrack, Santa Anita racetrack, into an ordnance school. So I completed the basic weapons and ammunition program at Arcadia. Then I was shipped to Salt Lake City for advanced weapons and ammunition program.
When you went to basic training, what was that experience like?
Well, basic training was a real challenge, and we enjoyed it. We liked the activities of the program and learned something about regimentation and the basic fundamentals of being a military person, as they called us, I guess. We enjoyed that very much. I mean, we were young and active, and we knew that we had something to do with the cause of World War II. I mean, fighting a war. And so we wanted to get into the areas that we felt that we could contribute most. The government made other decisions, so we just went with what they said. We enjoyed it, though. I always enjoyed the challenge of whatever it was. So when we completed our ordnance training, then we were assigned to an Air Corps base at Mountain Home, Idaho. And they told us that the training that we were getting at Mountain Home was phase 1 for overseas assignments. After spending a few months there, we were transferred to Wendover Field, Utah for the second phase. And that's where our group, the 461st Bomb Group, was organized as far as we were concerned.
So what was your actual position?
I was a weapons specialist was my field, and working with ammunition. So we, although I didn't, my assignment was not to load bombs. I found that the troops, my colleagues, the 29 of us, needed help from time to time. So I did my weapon work as well as the helping do the other tasks that were assigned to us. After we completed our work at Wendover, we went to Hammer Field, California, Fresno, California, for our final overseas training. And we just continued doing our work at the base until we were shipped out overseas.
Did you feel nervous knowing that you were going overseas?
We were on December 31st, we left Hammer Field cross country on a troop train and went to Newport News, Virginia. We were put on joined a convoy. We were assigned to a Liberty ship. The Georges Hanley was the name of that ship. And then we spent about 37 days crossing the Atlantic Ocean, going through Straits of Gibraltar. We stopped at Sicily for about a week through the Messina Straits, and then went on into Naples.
What was it like on the boat?
Well, aside from being seasick, it was pleasant.
Did you get seasick?
We hit some storms, as they normally did in the North Atlantic, so we took our share of the rocking. Right after we entered the Mediterranean Sea, we had our first experience with being frightened, totally frightened, because of the attack that the Germans had placed on our convoy. Fortunately, we were not hit. There were no sunken ships in the convoy, but there was a lot of nerve-wracking experiences because the gun crews aboard the ship made plenty of noise, and we had no idea what was taking place. So it made us aware of the war effort.
Yeah.
But we landed in Naples, and when we landed, it was quite obvious that the harbors had been bombed a number of times, and there were ships that we saw the bottoms of the ship showing, and that again was quite a traumatic experience because of we knew we were in a war effort. Okay.
Do you remember any of the thoughts that went through your mind when you first saw that?
Well, we knew that the attacks were being made, and we knew that Italy was very much a part of the war, and fortunately, our commanding officer, Colonel Landsberg, had us leave the ships, and we marched about 9 miles or so down to a place called Bagnolia, which is, and I think that's the correct pronunciation, but the University of Naples was in that area, and we were housed in the bombed out area of the university. We slept on marble floors for about a week.
Without any padding?
Well, bedding, no, we had our blankets. That was about it. But yeah, we were very fortunate, and it was cold. We knew that, but the coldness didn't bother us as much as it did the children. Children, there were a lot of starving, hungry children in that community, and they would be with shirtless or sleeveless clothing. Many of them were barefooted, and this was in February of, the end of February, beginning of March of 1943. So they were cold and hungry, and we were nippy, I mean chilly, but we weren't as bad off as the children were. And that we were young people. We shared with them, and So we always made sure we had a little bit of extra food on our plate, and when we were finished, we would pour it into their tin cans or whatever they had to the containers so that they could feed their families. So that was a first real awakening of what the war had done, and we talked with people who had been bombed, and so it was an awakening. Okay. Well, we spent about a week or so in southern, or in the Naples area, and then we went over to, we took a train over to eastern Italy, down in the Cerignola, Foggia, Bari area, and that's where our base was. Our landing strip was ready for us, and so that's where we operated out of there then for about 18 months, until the World War II ended in Europe. So,
what was a typical day like?
a typical day for us, in my assignment, was to make sure that all the weapons, all the aircraft had weapons that were ready for combat. So, as a repairman and serviceman of the military, of the aircraft, the weaponry, it was my job to see that everything was operational. And if a machine gun was having problems, or if a crew member felt that something wasn't right, well, I'd remove the machine gun, the 50 caliber machine gun, and replace it with one that had been functioning properly. Then I'd repair while they were on our mission or on flight. I'd repair the gun, and I would test fire it. That meant that I had to fire many rounds of 50 caliber machine guns, bullets, on almost a daily basis. And consequently, well, I did that out on in an isolated area, and to protect the farming area, I found a place that I'd shoot into a hillside, which had was shaped like a horseshoe, so I'd shoot into the horseshoe, which consequently I had a great amount of echo sound. As a result of that, I damaged my ears. That's why I'm wearing hearing aids today. I have about a 65% loss in one ear and 35% loss in the other ear, but it had to do with day-to-day firing of the weapons. We didn't have earplugs. We didn't know enough about hearing losses to wear protection. So consequently, we've got a bit of that problem. That was part of what I would do, and the other part, I would help the ordnance crew. There were 29 of us. I would help them load bombs, so they'd get an order for the next day's mission, for example, and it could include, we'll say, 500-pound bombs, RDX bombs or whatever, or it could include, could be 250-pounders or 100-pound bombs, clusters of bombs, or we'll say fragmentary bombs, or anti-personnel bombs. And the typical day was to wait for an order and then prepare the bombs, load them into the plane, see that they were fused properly, and then wait for the mission to take place. A typical day would be just to have a bomb order, okay? But the weather would change and targets would change, and it was not uncommon to have loaded the bombs that were that we were scheduled to, but then unload them and bring in another replacement load, which would be any one of the combinations, depending on the target and the distance that they were the distance from southern Florida to the target area. And so a typical day was get ready to change as targets changed. All right. So that was thing, and it was usually done in the evening. Uh, so I'd be repairing machine guns during the day, and then in the evening I'd be helping the ammunition group, the bomb jockeys as they were called, put the bombs in the plane and get them ready. And then just prior to takeoff, which was usually just about daylight, I was out on the line, uh, waiting for any changes or any calls that the air crew would need to replace the planes. It was we didn't get to know too many of the other workers who worked during the day, because we were more or less a night crew. But we got to be friendly with the maintenance crew, because some of them would have to be out on the airplane during the night and so on. But we just kept ourselves busy so that we didn't worry about too many other things.
Mm-hmm. Did you become close friends with the guys that you worked with?
Oh yes, very much so. We knew their hometowns and knew their families, and we always had teams of one sort or another. We played quite a bit of football and softball. Anything to kill the time, and it's what it amounted to. We found that if people sat around and did nothing, then they became disgruntled or frustrated, or they'd be missing their homes and things of that sort. Mm-hmm. So of course, we'll always watch for the mail coming in, and we always look for the packages that people would send, and then we shared. That was a big part of it. That we did a lot of sharing. We became real buddies, and the thing I've found is that many people don't realize the closeness that we had, the attachment that we had. Like coming to a reunion, you say, well, I haven't seen these guys in 40 years, but we meet and talk, and we relive a lot of experiences and so on. Mm-hmm. So there's a group of us in Fresno that were in the same bomb group, and we still get together. The second Tuesday of every month, we have a breakfast to get together. Then we started about 11 of us, and now we're down to 4 that can meet with us. One of them's in a convalescent home, so we go visit him. But that's the sort of thing. Thing I'm finding is that people don't know the attachment, and I'm sure that the service people who are who've come out of Korea situation or the Vietnam War, and the same thing is going to be true of the people who are in the Middle East. They're going to establish friendships that won't quit. Before I came down here, I made phone calls to 4 of my 29 that I know are surviving, and unfortunately, 3 of them, there was no answer on their phone, but the 4th one, there was just take a message. So I know that person has survived, but I'm not quite sure of the other 3. But when I get back, I'll certainly give them a call. I'll send them a letter describing the reunion we're having and the inquiries that were made about them and that sort of thing. So it's an interesting experience that people just don't understand. We watch programs like MASH or that sort of thing. We relive a lot of the silliness that went on, and because we did some silly things.
What are some of those stories?
Well, we had a pet rabbit in my tent, and a neighbor tent had a dog, young dog. So every now and then we'd take the rabbit out and the dog and let them chase each other around. Well, it's silly, but we did that.
Where did you get the rabbit?
I don't know where we got it. Sometimes the air crews would bring little animals over, and You just adopt them, you know. We had one little dog that was hit with a motorcycle, and we nursed it and got it well and everything. But that takes a lot of attention, and it keeps our mind occupied.
I have a pet rabbit, so I was
Beg pardon?
I have a pet rabbit.
Okay.
So-
Well, I'm sure you don't want to chase by a dog, but anyway, this was a funny thing, and it would circle around, and finally when we didn't want it to get worn out, of course, so we'd save it for another day. We would, over in Italy, there were a lot of lizards, and so we would chase the lizards. I mean, how in the world can you catch a lizard? And but anyway, that's the thing. And we did a lot of building. We were creative people. We would use the materials that were available to us, and for example, we would put flooring in on the tents made from fragmentary bomb cases, the wooden cases. And then there was a metal liner in the fragmentary bomb case that we could melt the solder that held the sheet metal together, and they would flatten it out, and that formed protection to keep the wind from blowing through our tents and things of that sort. We'd take 55-gallon drums and cut them in half and make a furnace out of that. And then we needed flues, so there was a British detachment, anti-aircraft detachment near us, so we got ammunition, got the casings from the British, and we built stovepipes and so on.
Did you just walk over to them and explain what you needed?
Oh yeah, and then we invited them. We felt that the British were much worse off than we were. They were away from home for 4 or 5 years, and they'd been in Africa and so on, and they weren't getting the rations that we were getting and so on. They didn't get good American cigarettes. And candy bars and so on. So we'd invite them over to our place, and we'd trade off, you know. We would, we helped each other. It was a good feeling, you know. And we would hear their stories, and they would hear ours, and theirs were much worse. I'd say they were lonely men who'd been away from home for a long time and had no idea when they were going to get back to England. Of course, we didn't know either, but we knew that at least part of our crew would be rotated.
Did you ever play practical jokes on each other, either in your group or...
I'm sorry?
Did you play practical jokes?
Oh, of course. I mean, little things like they played cards, and I can remember that we'd always make sure one of our friends wore sunglasses. And those sunglasses would reflect the cards. So we could be across from them reading their cards, and they couldn't understand why we were doing what we were doing. We had one person in our squadron, in our ordnance group, who couldn't stand Western music, country music, and so on. And we'd get him in the truck and put him in the middle so he couldn't get out, and then we'd sing to him all the way, you know, for half an hour or so, drive him crazy. The other thing, the trucks had 2 fuel tanks, and they had a switch that would shut one tank off, and or if the other one was empty, then we would throw the switch, and the engine would pick up from the other tank. Well, some of the people didn't know about that, so they'd be driving along, we'd put the switch in the middle, and they'd run out of gas, and they wouldn't know what to do. Just practical jokes that some of we can't talk about. They'd hang a person, take his bunk, and lift it off the floor and while he was sleeping, and he'd wake up and he'd reach for the floor, it wouldn't be there, you know. There were some accidents too. We had, several of us had been in the hospital for one reason or another. I happened to have an appendectomy on December 7th, 1944, so I was in the Cherignola General Hospital. And while I was recuperating, while they put me in charge of a day room, playing music for the people, can they come in, phonographs and that sort of thing, and see that they got cards and all. So if we knew someone had a special song, he and his girlfriend had a special song, and it would upset them if they heard it, why, I'd make sure that they heard it so that they could cry a little bit, you know. Just cruel things. But it was all in fun. If someone needed assistance, I mean, if they were going into town and they were short of money, we just loaned them the money and didn't worry about it. We knew that everything was fine. But I'd say we helped each other out quite a bit. We would help them write letters. One of the things we did, which may have been cruel, was that we wrote letters to all the girls back home. We told them we were having a contest, and the contest to see which girl thought the most of her GI and could put the most and the best food in a shoebox. We gave them a certain dimension and so on. Well, everyone sent the letters out, and as they would get food from the girls, we didn't even think about sugar rationing. We didn't think about those things at all. We didn't think about the hardships. But they would send us a package, then we would share, that sort of thing. So.
Was there a girl back home who you were writing to?
Beg pardon?
Were you writing to any girl back home?
I wrote to a few, yes, and I mean that was all part of it. I married one of them that I had written back to, so I've been married 58 years to a lovely lady, and I'm so pleased. The world's been good to us. We came back from the service. We had an opportunity to take advantage of the GI Bill. I happened to go to college and got my degrees. I went to Penn State, and I taught in the public schools of Altoona, Pennsylvania, and then I had an opportunity to go to Penn State and teach and get my doctorate. So I taught there for a couple of years, and then I moved to Fresno, California, and taught at California State University, Fresno, for 41 years. So we took advantage of that situation. We're very fortunate, and we know hundreds of thousands of men did the same thing, and their life improved tremendously as a result of this. So we're grateful to the GI Bill and for what the government has done for us. We have no complaints at all about that. We hope that the government continues to take care of the veterans, and it's a long-term task. We know that. I feel certain that they will. I just hope that the returning GIs today take advantage of the educational opportunities that are available to them, and to the other types of provisions that are made available. We have had some friends who their lives were less than desirable. I mean, it turned out that they weren't as fruitful as they could have been, and a lot of circumstances caused them to make the decisions they had. But I would certainly urge anyone to get the help that's available to them, and be aware of what can be done. We still have friends from the war. We keep in touch, and we laugh about the things that went on, and we regret some of the things that took place. But I think there were some accidents that occurred. I had friends that had been burned. I had friends that were in vehicle accidents. I had friends who had been killed as a result of accidents and that sort of thing. But most of us survived. And I think we had a good attitude about it. Sure, we complained and we moaned a little bit and so on. When you sat and stood out in the rain and with your mess kit, you're holding a spoon of beans and the rain's washing the beans off off the spoon. You can't be too happy about that. We had a lot of intestinal problems. I mean, this was a common thing because of the sanitary conditions that we just lived with it. Bismuth was a typical day for me. I mean, you took it to keep your stomach settled. DDT was a lifesaver for me. People complain about DDT, but we had mattress covers, they called them, and we went down to the haystacks and filled them with the straw. Well, the straws were infested with fleas and insects and so on. So I would take a can of DDT and cover my mattress with it. I mean, it'd be white, just like talcum powder covering it. Then I'd put my blanket on top of that and cover it with DDT. And that's what I did for 18 months. I had DDT, and I was breathing it all the time, and I couldn't understand why people were complaining about DDT. And I've had no lung problems. I don't know what other problems I might have had, but and right now I've had a little bit of I have 5 acres of almonds that I've had in California while I'm teaching and that sort of thing. But we're concerned about pesticides and insecticides and all those things. DDT, I guess they've proven it's not, we shouldn't use it, but I'm not a living example of what, well, maybe I am a living example of what DDT can do for us. It may have affected me somewhat, but.
Well, throughout the war, when you were there, did you have a concept of,
I'm sorry?
What was your concept of the progress that was being made in the war?
The what being made?
Well, were you aware of the progress that was being made?
Oh, yes. That was one of my hobbies was when I'd get the bomb load, I know what the bomb load was. I'd know how much fuel the planes were carrying, and I knew what their estimated time of arrival or departure and arrival. So a game that I would play, and I knew the fuses that were being used in the bombs. So I would estimate what they were going to bomb, how far it was going to be, and so on. For example, it could be Linz, Austria, which would be a ball bearing factory, or it could be the Palesti oil fields, or it could be the submarine bins over southern France, railroad marshalling yards. If we were out to destroy personnel and we had fragmentary bombs, I'd get a pretty fair idea where it was. And then I'd watch the maps that were being developed in our intelligence area, and I could see what was happening. I watched the progress. And then when they were invading southern France and General Patton needed fuel for his planes, or his tanks, we converted our B-24s into transport planes. We loaded them with ammunition and fuel for the tanks. And that was we got special recognition for doing that one time. So we would fly our planes into France or whatever area Patton's troops were, and they would unload the planes and then fly them back. So instead of using them as gunning bombers, they were used as cargo planes, and that was a special thing. And I remember we had to raise the tails, lower the nose gear of the B-24, and raise the tail up so that we could load the crops in, or the load the ammunition and tanks into them, or the drums, oil drums, and cans of gasoline, whatever it happened to be. So that was a special situation for us. we had a number of planes that would come in from time to time that would be shot up or damaged, and there'd be some crash landings, and there would be other landings that were where planes were given the right of way to come in because of wounded people aboard and that sort of thing. We were concerned. We were concerned about our troops. We looked for our friends to come back. I mean, so any way we could help them, we would do that.
Were you relieved whenever a plane would come back?
Were we what?
Relieved?
Oh, definitely. You know, and we remember days that we hit some very serious targets. Linz, Austria, I think we lost 27 out of 29 planes one day. We lost a lot of men.
What impact did that have on the atmosphere at the base?
We knew we had a job to do, and as some of them said, none of us wanted to destroy. None of us wanted to destroy, but we knew that we had to. There was the Axis had an ulterior motive. They were going to conquer the world, and we were part of that. So we did what we could do. You see, many of us went in, we say, well, I want to be a paratrooper. Well, the government said, okay, I was in good shape and all, but they thought I could do other things, so I didn't. I didn't. Thank God I wasn't a paratrooper. And most of us just had faith in what we were doing. We knew what we were doing, and sure, we complained a little bit about this. We would get out, we'd load the bombs one night, and if they get a call in the middle of the night, we'd work maybe 36 hours without sleep. But it's the sort of thing you just did, and you didn't complain. We were better off than the guys who were up there with the airplanes being shot at and that sort of thing, you know. So we did everything we could to make our job as proficient as possible. But we had a good attitude. We were alert all the time. I mean, when we first landed on the east coast of Italy, the British were taking eastern Italy, and the Americans were on the western side. And when we arrived, they were still, we could hear the shells, the artillery at night. We could see the flashes and so on. It was close enough to us. So we had prepared ourselves in the event of the Germans coming in. Why we were trained to handle that situation as well as could be expected. We stood guard on our airplanes at night. We sat out there and walked around or whatever. We were armed, and we were serious about what we were doing. There were some incidents not in our group, but other nearby groups that just made us more alert of the situation. Because, I mean, there was sabotage, there were, you know, things of that nature taking place, and we couldn't take any chances. Mm-hmm. And we had drills. We drove out. I mean, we'd have our night drills where we'd go out and cover the hillsides and things of that sort and we were prepared and that sort of thing. So that they kept us well aware of what was happening, and I think we felt comfortable about it because we knew we were trained. We were prepared to do what had to be done. Mm-hmm. So.
Did you ever feel like you personally were in danger?
Was I what?
Did you ever feel like you were in danger?
Oh, yes. I was corporal of the guard in southern Italy, over by Naples in Magnolia, and my job was to change the guards every 2 hours or whatever. And it was pitch black, and every now and then there would be some flares up in the air. There'd be German or airplanes flying over, and the British anti-aircraft would take shots at them and all. But I got noticed one night that there were some sounds coming from an area where there shouldn't have been. There was a photo lab across, and that's okay. And I was to go over and find out about that. Well, there was a wall about 2 feet high that I had to go over. So I was crawling on my belly like I was taught to do, and I had a 45 automatic cocked, ready to fire in the event that I needed to. But fortunately, I heard female voices. A couple young ladies were giggling while they were, and I had guards on that duty. I mean, they were at that post. So I figured if they're giggling, why, there's not too much danger. So I got up. But I was afraid I was going to have to fire, and that scared me because I didn't want to do that. But you do what you had to do. And the other thing, our guys were all new overseas, less than a week, and they would be out on these outposts, and they were scared. And little things like these Italian women would have clothing hang on the lines to dry, and the wind would blow through, and that would make noise. So these people, these GIs, you'd hear a machine gun, a Tommy gun firing a couple times. You know, they're shooting at the clothing. Or if a dog, this is what I reported, the dogs were out there moving, but anything that moved, they wasn't supposed to happen. So the guys would shoot, and we don't know if they ever hit anything or not, but that's the sort of thing. We were all on edge. You know, we were trained to be alert. One of the things we did when we first got there, we had bands of just hordes of kids, teenagers, all the way down to 6, 7-year-old. I don't know how young they were, but they were hungry, and they didn't have clothing like I had mentioned earlier. So they would just race through our area, grab anything they could. Well, we couldn't permit that, so we would chase these kids, and if we caught them, then we'd take them up to this guardhouse where I had been stationed, and keep them there in a fenced-in area, and they'd talk us out of our candy and all the goodies, you know. we would capture them, and then we would feed them, you know, that sort of thing. Then at night, we would put them in a 6-by truck, the big truck.
The kids?
The kids. Put them in a truck and haul them out of town for maybe a mile. It's at night, drop them off, and then we'd drive back. Well, as soon as we dropped them off and turned around, they'd start throwing rocks at us. So it was a game every day. That's what we did. The other thing is that the hills of around Naples had tunnels through them. I mean, it was fortification and so on, or bomb shelters and whatnot. Well, these kids were smart little guys. We'd chase them, and they'd run into these tunnels. Well, back in the tunnels, we could only see so far. We didn't have lights or anything. We'd chase them, and when we couldn't see anything, we were silhouettes. And these kids had piles of rocks back there. So we would chase them in. They'd get to their ammunition and start throwing, so we'd tail it out. Of course, we weren't going to shoot any kids. I mean, that wasn't the thing of it. Our job was to keep them secure. But these are little things that happen that you can sit back and laugh, but when someone's throwing a rock at you, you're not laughing. But I can remember one little boy, I was about 14 or 15, I guess, and I got him try to walk ahead of me. He resisted, so I got him by the back of the shirt and had a little switch. I was switching his bare legs, you know. But you feel like a fool doing it, but you do what you have to do. But I think all in all, we were very, very fortunate. We lost a fair number of our air crews in particular. We had some illnesses take some of our ground crew. We had some hardships back home where the families, where the men went back. But by and large, I think we were very, very fortunate with the number of casualties that we had. And of course, each one's important to us. You'll never forget the first corpse being carried out of an airplane. I mean, I visualize that to this day. A young man ran out of oxygen and died. But all in all, I can't complain about my experiences. It gave me an opportunity. I'd never have gotten to the education that I had. I'm sure I wouldn't have. I grew up in a railroad town, and most of my friends worked at the railroad and so on, but a number of them went to college and went into various professions and jobs. So, and when I went to college, communications was a field of mine. In fact, I was director in the Instructional Media Center at Fresno State for about 20 years, and I was in the Telecommunications Committee, and I established a telecommunications system for Fresno State, which is in operation today. And so I feel good about it. And I've been behind cameras, and I've been in front of cameras, and although you wouldn't know it.
Great. Yeah.
But anyway, it's good. And I have 3 brothers who are military. One retired as a colonel, Air Force. Another retired as a major, Air Force. They were in SAC, Strategic Air Command, missiles, and one was a jet pilot and helicopter and so on. The other brother was in communications in the Air Force up in Alaska, and then they all became educators of one type or another, and so we're very, very fortunate.
Where were you when you heard that the war was over?
I was in Italy. In fact, I brought back and gave to the archivists at our group a copy of Stars and Stripes, The Day the War Ended. Let's see. So, yeah, we were in Italy, and we were pleased, of course, to say the least, and we celebrated in a joyful way, and I wasn't in the drinking phase of it, but we had a lot of fun. I danced and did the things that was a great, great day. And then, of course, there was a certain amount of sadness knowing that some of our people that weren't here. For example, you talked to Pete Cadena the other day. He had been a friend of mine overseas, and I didn't know what had happened to him. He was a prisoner of war. He was shot down. And then I hadn't met him until 40 years later, about 40 years later. We happened to be in Fresno, and I met with the group from our bomb group, and yeah, we've been very, very, very good friends.
So you didn't know what happened to him, and then
No. We knew that he was missing. We knew that he was missing, but we lost so many people, and in those days we didn't know, well, if they came back. I mean, if they went to Yugoslavia or some of the other, we'll say northern Italy, many of them would come back. But if they went farther up into Germany or Austria or some place like that, well, we just lose track of them altogether. Mm-hmm. So, sure, you remember them, but it was just something in the past, and then all of a sudden you meet guys. So, yeah.
That's great.
And as I said, we've kept in touch with most of my ordnance group for years, Christmas cards and letters from time to time, and then you hear of them passing, or you lose their address, or in some cases there have been divorces and that sort of thing. But at least 4 of them last Christmas we were writing, and as I said, when I get back, I'll write to them. Hopefully I get a response from each one.
Mm-hmm.
But
wow. So then did you come straight home?
beg pardon?
Did you come straight home after the war was done?
Yes. Well, we were supposed to go to Pacific, but our colonel got us to come back to the States for advanced training for B-29s and advanced weaponry. And as a result of that, we came to the States. We went home. We had our furlough, and then we went back to. I went back to a base in Pennsylvania, and they told me to go back home again and then go to North Carolina. In the meantime, while I was home on my second trip, the VJ Day came about, and then when I went to North Carolina, it was a matter of separation, getting ready for separation from service. So then on October 18th of 45, I was discharged. And then I went to work for the railroad, Pennsylvania Railroad, and I told them I didn't particularly care to shovel sawdust into the wind. So I was a little bit of a maverick, I think, but I enjoyed life. But then I happened to go into a physician's office one day. I had a little rash around my neck, and it irritated me, and I walked past the physician's office one day. I didn't know the man. I saw his office hours. No one was in there, so I went in and we chatted, and he took care of the ointment and all that stuff. And as we talked, he wanted to know what I'd done and what we were doing and what I planned to do and things of that nature. And I said, well, the GI Bill was there, and I thought maybe I'd get into the metalsmith business, roofing and rain spouts and things of that sort. And he said, oh, you should go to college. And I said, oh, yeah, well, maybe someday. He said, no, okay. Well, this is a stranger. This is a stranger. And the more we talked, the louder he got, the more convincing he became, and the more swearing he did. He made me promise. He made me promise that since Penn State was registering that week in my hometown, he made me promise to go out and at least look the situation over. So to save my skin, I promised, and I left. I got out of there. Went home and told my brother, who happened to be home on leave. He had come in from the Pacific. He was a bombardier in the B-29s. And I said, told him what the doctor said. And he used a little, well, okay, let's go and see what they have to say. So we went out. I registered hotel administration that day, and he registered business administration. And we started at Penn State within the next 2 weeks. So I thank that man. I never went back to see him, but I pray for that man so many times. I have prayed. He's a great man. And, otherwise, I don't know what I'd been doing. I'd probably been a hobo.
That's great. Well, we just have a few minutes left, but how do you think being in the military, being in the war, made you who you are today?
Well, I've always believed in our country. Our family was strong believers in our country and a democracy and that sort of thing. So that wasn't new. When the war came, we were attacked by Japan. We knew what was going on in Germany. We were opposed to Hitler and Mussolini, and we never did favor Stalin. But anyway, there wasn't much of a change in my life. I mean, I felt strongly, I'm an American, I have a responsibility to America. I saw what the 3 C's did to help the people, and it's the youth as well as the World War I veterans. I saw that. I could see that our country was doing great things, and there was no better country in the world as far as I was concerned. So it reinforced my beliefs. I'm grateful for what our generation could do, but I'm sure any generation would do the same thing if they believe, and we strongly do that. Seeing other parts of the world, and I've been in Europe a couple of times. I've been to the Caribbean, and I've been in Taiwan and Hong Kong, and so I've done a little travel. There's no country greater than our country. We're doing more for people than any other nation in the world. We're not happy with everything that goes on. I mean, we like to blame, and everyone has a solution. I don't think we have the solutions because we really don't know what the problems are. We look back and say, we should have done this, we should have done that, and so on. I've had friends who were with Chennaults, Flying Tigers, and so on. And they had the same types of feelings that I had, and I have. If I could go to Iraq and serve, I would do that. But I feel that I'm 81 years old. I'd be a detriment. See, I'd be taking the place of some person who could do more. And with our groups and so on, I think the younger generation has to take over, and we've got to give them the opportunity. You people, you're the ones who are going to make this world. And whether you realize it or not, it's yours. And the burden is on your shoulders, and you can learn from us, but you'll know much more than we ever knew. Let's see. If I were to start teaching college again, I'd start from freshman year, because I'm so far behind technology and all these things. You people are with it. And if you could just convince people of your generation of their responsibilities. I'm going to choke up. I'm sincere. I believe in what we've done. I believe in what you people can do. And I'm sure you will. And I thank you for the opportunity to be here. And my grandkids are going to hate this.
They'll love it.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much.
Well, I appreciate it.
Really, really appreciate it.
Oh, I hope that camera's off.